Assalamu alaikum students. This is Maqsudur Rahman and I'm here for class 4's English Comprehension, and today we will be completing the last unit that we have in our syllabus, and this unit is unit number 20. This unit is called What Keeps a Hot Air Balloon Flying? Okay, so for those of you who are wondering what a hot air balloon is, I am sure many of you must have seen this, but for those of you who don't know, this will give you an idea. Okay, so you must have seen this balloon flying around, and interestingly enough, they can carry passengers, right? Few number of people can get on it and have a ride. Okay, so now let's move on to the text. Okay, focusing on this part, let's start. So, Unit 20, what keeps a hot air balloon flying? Have you ever wondered what keeps a hot air balloon flying? The same principle that keeps food frozen in the open chest freezers at the grocery store allows hot air balloons to fly. Now, this might seem a bit hazy, right? It, these two lines might be a bit confusing to you, but as we read on, things will clear up, right? So first of all, let's go for the words. What about the word wondered? Wondered means to think, right? So have you ever thought? And principle over here means a set of rule, right? Or a set of rules or some theory. Okay, so uh, also look at this part, open chest freezers, right? So open chest freezers are something similar to what we call deep fridges in our country, right? So if you have ever been to a supermarket, you must have seen that they have these sections where they have these grocery and fish and meat and stuff like that, and they store that in these large chest freezers, right, on in these deep fridges, right? And what you will be able to understand if you have gone to the supermarket is that usually these are uh, definitely very cold, right? The temperature is cold near about those freezers, and that is because they need to keep the food cold to keep it good, right? So the point to focus on over here is if we have seen this, or if you have gone to the supermarket and if you have seen the chest freezers, you must have seen that there are these very cold cold air uh, around the food, right? Or around the food that they are storing, right? So there's this smoke that that is around the food. This smoke is similar to the smoke that we usually get when we supposedly when you at your home, supposedly when you open your freezer or open your fridge, you will be able to, you must have seen this, right? You will be able to see this cloud of smoke or cloud of air, cold, which is quite cold, right? Which keeps the food good, right? So coming back to our text, it's a very basic principle. So how are all these things related to the hot air balloon flying? Let's just have a look. Hot air rises and cold air falls. So the basic principle of science suggests that hot air, when you heat air, it rises and cold air falls. Now if you haven't done this in science, I'm sure you'll do this soon, that whenever we heat air, it becomes lighter and eventually it rises up. And if we decrease the temperature for air, or if we cool the air, it eventually becomes heavier and so it falls near the ground, right? So this is the principle that keeps the hot air balloon flying. Okay. Now, so while the super cooled air in the grocery store freezer settles down around the food, the hot air in the hot air balloon pushes up. So simply, as I was saying, the cloud of smoke that you can see in the supermarket, they settle down around the food, right? Because it is cold. Just like that, when the air inside a hot air balloon is heated, it simply pushes up and it tries to go upwards because it becomes light, right? So keeping the balloon floating above the ground. So this principle is what keeps the balloon floating above the ground. In order to understand more about how this principle works in hot air balloons, it helps to know more about hot air balloons themselves. Okay, so the next para must deal with what hot air balloons are made up of, right? Okay, so focusing on the next para now. A hot air balloon has three major parts: the basket, the burner, and the envelope. The basket is where passengers ride. We can easily understand that, right? So that is where the passengers ride onto. The basket is usually made of wicker. Now, what is wicker? Wicker is in Bangla, it's called bet, right? We see all these furnitures made of bet, right? So we can see the basket is usually made of wicker. Now, two advantages that we are getting by using wicker to make the basket is: one, it is comfortable for the passengers to ride in, and also it is adding a little extra weight, right? So which is very important as the balloon needs to fly simply, right? Okay, so the next one is the burner. The burner is positioned above the passenger's head and produces a huge flame to heat the air inside the envelope. So the air is trapped inside the envelope, right? So this huge flame is being produced by the burner to heat up the air inside the envelope. The envelope is the colorful fabric balloon that holds the hot air. So refer to the image that we saw before we started the unit. You must have seen that colorful fabric, right? So that is where the air is trapped in. Right, so the envelope is the colorful fabric balloon that holds the hot air. When the air inside the envelope is heated, the balloon rises. Simply, the pilot can control the up and down movements of the hot air balloon by regulating the heat in the envelope. Okay, so again, let's think of the principle. Simply, hot air is rising and cool air is falling down. So simply, if the pilot heats up the air inside the envelope, the balloon will automatically go up, and if the pilot lessens the heat and cools the air, automatically it will come down, right? So to ascend, the pilot heats the air in the envelope. When the pilot is ready to land, the air in the balloon is allowed to cool and the balloon becomes heavier than air. This makes the balloon descend. So ascend means to go up and descend means to come down, right? So we can see how this basic principle is working for controlling the altitude of the balloon, right? Okay, now coming to the third para, or the most important para. Now let's see what this says. Before the balloon is launched, the pilot knows which way the wind is blowing. This means that she has a general idea about which way the balloon will go. Okay, so you must have some experience to become any kind of pilot, right? So uh, even though it may not be as complicated as flying a plane, but still you must have some knowledge about controlling the balloon, right? And how to control it. Okay, moving on now. But sometimes the pilot can actually control the direction that the balloon flies while in flight. So this is interesting. Okay, so the pilot, what he or she will be doing is they can actually control the balloon direction while in flight. So as it is flying, they can control the direction. How? This is because the air above the ground is sectioned into layers in which the direction of the wind may be different. So Very interesting. So if you think about this, just think that the air above us, above the ground, may be filled in caskets or baskets. Okay, they are layered into this one huge basket. Okay, think of a chest of drawer. So these air have different movements above the ground. So I'll give you an example to clarify this. So even though the pilot can steer the balloon, she can fly higher or lower into different layer of air. So this is what is happening, right? So as you can see that we don't have a steering wheel like we do on a car, on a hot air balloon, but still the pilot can steer the balloon by knowing about the different layers of air. Okay, so before we read the last few lines, let's just look at this example. Okay, so think of these three layers. First of all, the yellow layer or layer 1 is the first layer above the ground. Now supposedly these arrows are depicting the air direction. Okay, now think about this. The air is simply moving to the left on layer 1. Okay, now whenever the hot air balloon is on layer 1, it is simply moving to the left. Now, if you think about layer 2, when the pilot takes the balloon up to layer 2, over here on layer 2, we can see that the arrows depicting the air are moving to the right, right? So, the air on layer 2 must be moving towards the right. And similarly again, probably on layer 3, the air is again moving to the left. Okay, so again we can see that the air is moving to the left, and the balloon, if you take it up higher, it will go to the left. So this is actually how the pilot can control or steer the balloon above the ground, right? So very interesting indeed. Okay, so coming back to our text, where were we? Okay, so even though the pilot can steer the balloon, she can fly higher or lower into a different layer of air. Some days the difference between the directions of the wind between layers is negligible, right? So some days we can see that the difference between the directions of wind between the layers is not so much. The wind is blowing very slightly or very lightly, we can say. Okay, but other days the difference is so strong that it can actually push the balloon in a completely different direction, right? So just like we have on a windy day, the strength of the wind is a lot. We can witness a very strong wind. Just like that, above the ground, these layers also have these windy days, right? So on a windy day, the pilot will have a lot of help from the air, and he can control the balloon easily by uh, controlling its altitude, right, and making it move to the left or to the right, and hence controlling its direction. Okay, so interesting. So I before we move on to the exercises, I was this chapter just or this unit just made me realize that we must be very lucky, or we must consider ourselves to be very lucky, right? Because we are reading about all these wonderful things, right? We are learning about so many different things, but there are many other schools or there are many other children who may not be this fortunate, right? So we must be thankful because of these wonderful topics that we have, right, which are in our book. Okay, so moving on to the exercises now. Okay, so these are the MCQs. First of all, we have, according to the passage, balloon pilots control the balloon's altitude by, altitude is the height, right? So what did we see? How can he control the altitude? It must have to do something with temperature, right? Because he is either, or they are either heating up the air inside the envelope to make the balloon go up higher, or cooling it down to make it fall, right? Okay, next one. As used in paragraph 3, which is the best synonym for ascend? So synonym means a similar word. Ascend, I have already discussed about this while reading the unit. So you must be able to do this. Also, the best antonym for descend, we also discussed this. According to the author, weaker is, okay, for this question, be a bit analytical over here. Okay, according to the author, weaker is comfortable, lightweight, durable. Now, choose your options, choose your option wisely, right? Now, we have talked about two things out of these three during the unit, during reading the unit, right? So focus on that, those two parts. Okay, if the hot air balloon pilot wants to change directions during flight, what might he or she do to accomplish this? Right, to change the direction. This is from the third para, and we discussed a lot about this, right? Okay, now using the passage as a guide, it can be inferred that which of the following statements is not true. Okay, I'll probably help you out a little bit with this one. Inferred meaning it can be summarized, right? So, what can be summarized? Okay, air goes up and out the top of a chimney when you light a fire. We know when the temperature is increased for air, it rises, right? So this is pretty simple. Cool air collects about the ceiling when you open a refrigerator. We know cool air usually drops to the ground. And what is the ceiling? The ceiling is the roof of your home, okay, or the roof of your room. So think about this. Smoke from a candle rises after you blow out the flame. Cold air coming from an air conditioning vent settles about the floor. So think of the principle that we have talked about. Hot air rises and cold air falls. You will be able to do this question, right? Okay. Based on its use in paragraph 4, it can be understood that negligible, again, I think we have discussed this. Look at these set of words. These are all synonyms. So you must find out the set which is synonymous to the word negligible. Okay. Okay, now answer the following questions. There are some words in the passage that have been used with their opposites. Find those pairs of opposite words from the passage. Hence, there are 5 such pairs. Okay, so immediately what comes to mind is ascend and descend. So this was used in the passage and this is one such pair. You need to find out 5 such pairs. Okay, I just helped you out with one. Okay, now the final one, write a story of your own using the opposite words you have found in above question. Okay, so in the above question you will be finding out the set of words and then making up a story of your own from with those. Okay, so anyways, that's pretty much it for the unit, and this will conclude our syllabus for the comprehension. So before we leave, these are the set of word meanings that we found out. The words are wonder, principle, envelope, weaker, ensure, regulate, ascend, descend, launch, section, steer, and negligible, right? So these are the word meanings, and to summarize the chapter, we can say a very basic principle that hot air rises and cold air falls keeps the hot air balloon flying. Then we saw about the balloon itself. It has 3 major parts. A hot air balloon has 3 major parts: the basket, the burner, and the envelope. And then finally, the hot air balloon pilot uses this section of layers of air above the ground to change direction, right? So this is the end of our syllabus. Hoping I'll see you soon. Okay, and thank you for your patience. Assalamu alaikum. Allah Hafiz.